And today at the Linux Certification Virtual Summit, we have Jesse Varsalone here to speak with us about CompTIA Linux Plus. Jesse, how are you?
I'm good. How are you
I
today?
am good. I cannot complain. Thank you for asking. So let's get right into it. Tell me, who is Jesse?
I've been teaching for 22 years. I'm currently a full-time faculty member at the University of Maryland University College. I taught in the Department of Defense on a contract at DC-3, basically a cyber schoolhouse, and I was a member of the network intrusions track. We taught different subjects. Many of them involved Linux, actually. One of them was forensics and investigations in a Linux environment, which was called File. And another course we taught was L&I, and that was where a hacker broke into systems, Windows, Linux, and Mac, and went through the network, stole things, and the students had to figure out what machines the hacker had gone to and how they lifted the data out of the network.
Perfect. I liked how you started off the back with tying cybersecurity to Linux, because as a cybersecurity professional, knowing Linux is very important. But what is your take on the connection between cybersecurity and Linux? Like, how important, though, is it to know Linux if you're, say, a security analyst, or you're an ethical hacker or pen tester?
Okay, great question. A lot of the best tools for doing that type of stuff are on Linux-based systems. For example, for a number of years, I was using Backtrack. I used Backtrack 2, 3, 4, 5. After that, they went to Kali, and now there's Kali 2. So those are distributions for pen testing, or what you might say hacking, that have all types of security tools on them. But where Linux has been the most important in my career is with actually some of the forensics. Specifically, in some of the ways that hard drives are imaged is by using a Linux live CD. You boot to the live CD. You run Linux commands. You really have to understand when you run the fdisk command what the different partitions and the different disks are displayed on the system, and then after that you need to be able to identify the disk, because basically if this is all command line, and if you don't know what you're doing, you can overwrite the drive that you're imaging. So, for example, if, say, someone's committed a crime or something, and you're making a forensic copy of their hard drive using DD or DCFL DD or DC3 DD, something like that, you would basically need to know which one is the basically suspect's drive and which one is the destination drive. Otherwise, there have been cases where people accidentally overwrote the drive. So knowing Linux has been essential to me in my career, and I've been using Linux actually since about the year 2000. So for about 16 years, the first distribution I used was called Mandrake, and then after that I started using Red Hat, then Fedora, then Ubuntu, and so I've extensively used the Backtrack and Kali distributions.
Great. Thank you for that. So, you did mention that you were introduced to Linux in, say, 2000, or you started using Linux in 2000. What actually introduced you to the world of Linux? Was it a new job? Was it just something you ended up taking up on your own?
Basically, I think I started getting interested in security. So some of the things that were done on Linux-based systems at the time. They didn't have the tools ported over for Windows working as well. An example would be like Nmap. Now that's a tool that's been ported successfully to Windows. But some of these tools just operate a little bit better in a native Linux environment because they were written for Linux. So that was part of it. Also, I did some network administration, And basically I would teach the students, how to set up like DHCP and DNS in Linux, how to teach them how a lot of things were similar in TCP/IP. So, both of them have ping, both Windows and Linux, both of them have FTP, both of them have Telnet. So you can start to, by showing the students these similarities between the various operating systems, it helps them to tie and connect everything together.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. What made you decide to become CompTIA Linux Plus certified?
Well, back then I was collecting as many certifications as I could. The exam has changed significantly since I took it in 2001. At that time, the exam was basically half hardware and half operating system, so it was thought to be like a different track for A plus, if you will. So actually I had hardware questions on there, like, stuff about serial ports and different things like that. It was a long time ago, but at the time, I believe I barely got through that exam, and the truth of the matter is that I've become very proficient in Linux because I've used it extensively, and I basically use it daily. So I'm very comfortable with Linux. I'm very comfortable with the commands, etc.
Great. So how did you prepare for your CompTIA Linux Plus at the time? Do you remember?
Sure. So, what I tell all the students that I have currently that are at UMUC is to go to the IT certification forums and read the suggestions. And in those forums, people will tell you, I studied for this, I prepared using this book was helpful, this book was didn't help at all, I failed using that. So I would use other people's experience and talk to people who had passed and find them. That's the way to be successful, is to find someone who has been successful and ask them, what did you do to be successful? And of course, I installed it on my own home system and played with it a lot. So that was what I did.
Perfect. So what kind of online forums do you forward your students to go to?
Well, any of the IT certification forums, let me see, I have some of them saved in my favorite.
Okay.
Techexams.net. That's one of the ones that I've used. Some of the ones that I used at the time are no longer available because I don't think they make a lot of money off of having these different forums. But anyway, the techexams.net /forums has information about various certifications, including Linux Plus.
Okay. What about say linuxquestions.org? I've heard of that one. Have you poked around there lately or
I think I may have used it. I use a lot of online resources when I'm having my Linux questions. Of course, you have to understand that Linux has evolved a lot over the 16 years that I've been using it.
do you see that as a good thing that it evolved? I
Oh, it
hope
was it
so.
was it was horrible when I first started using it. There were no drivers. There were no. It was partitioning drives was difficult. We had difficult removing it from the system when we were trying to install Windows. All those days are kind of gone now. Linux it has the best drivers. When you boot up, you barely ever have to add a driver for anything in Linux. The package management used to be absolutely brutal. You would install a package and it says I need these 5 dependencies, and you would Google for hours and find those 5, and then those 5 would say they needed 5. So that was the terrible days of Linux, and you used to have to compile programs. You still do sometimes, manually .forward configure make install. But nowadays you can just do an apt get, and not only will it get what you need, it'll go get the dependencies. So that is one of the main reasons that there was such a barrier to people using Linux for a long time, because in Microsoft Windows you can just find a file, install it, and you're done. It's super easy. Anyone could do it, but Linux was harder. But now with apt-get and stuff like Yum, you can get packages and it gets the dependencies, and you're not stuck. So Linux used to be very arduous and very hard to use, and now it's so much easier, and it has so many drivers, and it's just way different than it was back then 16 years ago.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. So, since you're a professor at the University of Maryland University College and you teach the CompTIA Linux Plus course, are there any commands or concepts from that exam that you make sure you drill into your students?
Um, well, the one thing that they should know is how to find what they need. So they can Google it, they can do, a double dash help, they can use the manual. So knowing how to look at, because for example, if you do LS has, like 40, 50 different options. So, no one's going to remember all those commands. But it's important to know how to find the information. One of the most important things about Linux understanding is actually chmod. You want to understand how to do permissions. There's absolute permissions and there's symbolic permissions. Some people just do chmod 777 on everything, which isn't the best to get. So there's read, write, and execute permissions for all. But sometimes you can't run stuff unless the appropriate permissions are assigned.
Yeah, I agree. And with the Chmod 777, I think that also ties into the security aspect of securing Linux because you don't want to give everyone permissions to, certain files and certain scripts to run. Okay. Are there any other commands maybe? What about, say, knowing how to use the input or output syntaxes?
Sure, those are some things we cover. One of the basic commands that I cover to everybody is just how to do echo and how to create a file and double redirection and appending a file through one or two greater than symbols. So that's one of the most basic things, is appending files and creating files. Talk about the cat commands, ways to display files, cat, more, less, head, tail. Those are all ways that we do a lot of that in security-related courses. We display text files, we look at them. So those are all parts of things that we do. The other thing I would say that we do a lot of also is in forensics. We use like the MD5 sum command to check hashes on files. So those are important commands as well. But that kind of wraps up. I teach a lot of networking. We do ping, we do trace route, we do a lot of the networking, FTP, Telnet, SSH. Those are we're very big on the networking.
Yeah. And those are all great commands and concepts that folks need to know for the Linux Plus exam as well. How about knowing to script? Is that a factor, do you think, for the exam? You did mention Echo, which is, a big part of, like, say, if you want to create a bash script as well.
Sure. I mean, most of the time I would use like an editor like LeafPad or gedit or kwrite to create a script. Creating small, simple bash scripts is something that I've had to do. Sometimes I, put commands into the bash profile. So when the user logs in, it sets up certain things like perhaps networking or start services, or that there's different things you can do within that. So yes, I've had to write, go in and set certain things to run at startup. That's been a part of my what I've had to do certain times. So scripting is definitely something that is a valued skill. It's not something that I'm necessarily the best at, but I've written some small scripts to do some small tasks to get the system tweaked to the way I wanted.
Sweet, sweet. And when in doubt, just Google if you know. So, how has being Linux Plus certified impact your life, and with you having all of this Linux knowledge overall, how has it impact your life?
Well, I would say the main thing is with, I've really been able to use that Linux knowledge for the security related things that I do. So that's the main thing that I've used all this for is, security. And there's a lot of network security, Linux related things. And I find that, my knowledge of Linux has really helped me have a more security focused career.
Perfect. If it was someone that's listening out there that wants to get into the cybersecurity field, how would you suggest they go about it in regards to the Linux skills that they need or the lack of Linux skills that they have right now? Do you feel that them obtaining the CompTIA Linux Plus certification exam would be a way to assist them on their way?
It would be one way. I suggest going to what I tell all the students is go to there's a free course out there called Metasploit Unleashed. It involves two Linux systems, Kali and Metasploitable. Metasploitable is basically a version of Linux that has a whole bunch of out-of-date applications like old versions of VSFTPD, for example, and older versions of like Java RMI that are vulnerable to attack. So by taking that course, you can learn a lot about exploitation, networking, Linux in general, because the whole course is Linux, and it is a completely free course. And we actually did some of that on this past Monday night with the Cyber Padawans.
What is the Cyber Padawans, by the way?
It's a world championship team that has won a large number of competitions. They have won different competitions like hacking competitions, analyst competitions, policy competitions. They've competed against some of the top universities in the world, not just country. Like for example, Oxford. They beat out like Penn State and other colleges in some of these competitions. Obviously, some of the competitions require the students to be full-time undergrad. Some allow grad, undergrad, full-time, part-time. Some allow instructors to compete, and our instructors have won competitions as well.
I agree. Jesse is a member of the team, and he's one of the great ones who you can ask any questions to, and he'll give you the answers. I'm also a member as well, and thanks to the Cyber Padawans, it has introduced me to Linux. Number one, it has advanced my Linux skills, and it made me become the cybersecurity professional that I am. So if any of you out there that are interested, please sign up at University of Maryland, University College. You have to be a student enrolled first, and it's a wonderful experience, actually. So, what are some blogs or podcasts that you may keep up with that keeps your Linux skills current or keep you knowing about certain upcoming Linux distributions? Because I know you mentioned Kali 2.0. Have you been reading anything, or do you read blogs and things of that nature that may let you know, okay, so this new forensics operating system is coming out, or something like that?
Actually, to be honest with you, I have several vehicles. I've been on the red team quite a bit for some of the competitions that actually UMUC is involved in. Before I came to UMUC as their faculty advisor for Cyber Padawans, I did a lot of red teaming. Some of the people that I was on the red team with, I'm friends with on Facebook. They post security-related articles all the time. I post some of those articles in the Cyber Padawans group, pretty much a lot of them. So all of the people in the Padawans can get some of that good information from me. So that's one way. But as far as blogs and stuff like that, not anything, but I do have a site that the first day I teach every student about Linux. I recommend, and that site is called distrowatch.com. And that site shows you about hundreds and hundreds of different distributions of Linux. And really, when one of my main points of showing the students in the class that site is look at all these distributions of Linux. You would never in your lifetime have enough time to install and play with all of them. And not only do they have like a good 250 distributions, you can select them by type and stuff like that. But they, even within, say, Fedora, there's like 21 different versions of Fedora. There's different versions of Ubuntu. They always have some cool names for their versions. So I just try to show them, all these different versions, some of these commands like ls and chmod and stuff like that, those commands work in any of those distributions. So the idea is, hey, don't get completely overwhelmed here. This is how much is out there, and no one has been exposed to all of it. So, you kind of have to have a learning curve as you go.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's one thing that's beautiful about Linux. As you spoke about the ls commands, the chmod command, say the cd command, you can use these universally on any, Linux machine. So knowing the basics and things of that nature is very important. So what is your take on experience versus certification? I know there's a big debate out there now about whether it's important to have experience or is it important to have certifications. For some of our audience members, some of them don't have the experience and they use certification to get the experience. What is your take or advice for someone who's looking to kind of gain both?
Like I said, early in my career, I got 20 certifications, something insane like that, because part of my appeal back then was I had a lot of certifications, but not as much experience. Now that I have a ton of experience doing things like hacking, incident response, analysis of intrusions, things like that. Now that I have experience and reputation, to me the certifications are very minimal to me now. But if I didn't have them in the beginning, I could have never gotten to where I am, because I wouldn't have gotten so many different opportunities. So I would say that they are extremely important when you are new in the field. And then as you become more seasoned in the field, they do become less important.
Thank you.
They kind of prove that you are at a level, but once you're at a level that's pretty evident, I think they're a little less needed.
I agree. Where do you see Linux at in 5 years? And just an overall question of how important is it to know Linux in general in the IT world? Okay.
I would say, it's, if you want to do anything outside of, just maybe desktop support, I think that you need, if you want to do security, incident response, hacking, penetration testing, network administration, if you want to go outside of just, desktop support or help desk career, I think Linux is extremely important. I think it's versatile. I think there are many people looking for people with skills in Linux, and it just seems that there's so few people that have really good Linux skills out there, and when they have them, they're in super high demand.
I agree. Do you think that the Linux skills that's are in high demand, do you think it's in correlation to a certification a person has as well?
I would say that the skills are the foremost thing. Some of the DoD, though, does require, for compliance issues, the people to be certified. I think if you have that many skills, you're not really, if they say you need the certification to work on this contract, I don't think it's going to be a problem for the person to study. Go to the forum I mentioned, see what's good to study, and pass the exam.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay, where do you see Linux at in 5 years from now?
I just see more and more adoption. The big thing that with Linux that wasn't true when I started 16 years ago is all these devices that run Linux, like my Roku box. My I actually have a Mega Touch machine, which if you ever seen those in like bars or like TGI Fridays, they have the games on the back end, the touchscreen games.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many different embedded devices that run Linux. So there's the Amazon. I believe that Amazon Fire Stick has a version of Linux. So obviously, my phone is an Android, so it's a version of Linux. So I just see more and more embedded type devices that run Linux, as their operating system because it's free and they don't have to pay a Microsoft license.
This is true. The beauty of open source, huh?
Hmm.
What are some resources that people can use in order to go get CompTIA Linux Plus certified? Is there something you recommend?
I would say, go to DistroWatch, download VMware Player, or VirtualBox, and use a virtual machine to practice your Linux. That's what I would say. I run Windows 7 on my host machine, but I have several different versions of Linux that I run in virtual machines and I use.
Mm-hmm. Great, great. Now, with your host machine, do you use that as your daily machine as well? Or is that just a separate box that you use to host your virtual machines on?
That's my daily machine. So I have VMware. If you're a UMUC student, you can actually get access to, or a student at pretty much any college, you can get access to VMware Workstation. I use VMware Workstation. With that, I have several virtual machines running Windows, Linux, and FreeBSD.
Perfect. Thank you. Final question. What is the most important advice you would give someone who's unsure about taking a CompTIA Linux Plus certification, but know they want a career in Linux? What would you tell them?
I would say that, if they want a career in Linux, find someone that has passed this, find someone who's worked. They have actually in many different cities and locations, they have working Linux groups. Meet some other Linux people and get together with them, talk about Linux, just network, join the Cyber Padawans, try out, learn as much as you can about Linux. You might install it. Definitely, you have to use it. You have to use it all the time to become very familiar with it. That's the key.
I agree. Thank you. Thank you. And when you say meet other folks that enjoy Linux, are you talking specifically about meetup groups or, say, school clubs like you mentioned the Cyber Padawans are?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that would be an example, but there are, I know in Columbia, Maryland, there's like a Linux group and stuff like that, and I've seen some other ones over the years, and then, there's like CISSP groups and stuff, so any type of the information technology groups, but I've seen Linux user groups in a lot of different cities, and I'd recommend it, and some of them have like little local hacker spaces too. So those get involved in that kind of stuff, and that way it's about networking. So even if you're the best Linux person in the whole country and you don't know anyone or you don't have any connections, you're still going to be at a disadvantage over someone who knows half as much as you, but happens to go to a Linux group and knows 10 people that work for Lockheed Martin and 10 people that work for Booz Allen and 10 people that work for CSC, and so knowing everything isn't good enough. You also have to know people and network, and you have to be able to work with people too, and that's also important.
Great. Thank you so much, Jesse. It was truly a pleasure and honor to have you here and speak about the importance of knowing Linux, not just solely in the IT world, but also in the cybersecurity world. Thank you so much.
All right, no problem. Thank you also.